hope I learned something. I hope I learned something. I hope I learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days.
Learning Curve, everyone, by my brother-in-law, Brian Dro. His email address is in the About section of, I believe, DLive and Trovo, the channels. Please check them out. Hello, I am your host, Hat, and welcome to the All Hat No Cattle Daily News Rodeo. Nice to have you here. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, something weird's going on. I am actually shaking right now. I feel like a leaf on a windy day. I don't know what's going on, so I can't promise anything today, but I'll do my best. I don't know how to describe it other than the way I just did. So let's just jump right into it. We've got a great Babylon Bee piece. I have not previewed it, so we're going to do it all live together. Then I have, of course, some stories about the disastrous get-together between Blinken and the Chinese, both yesterday and today in Alaska. And I have an update in the after show regarding the Atlanta tragedy, the shootings that took place recently. The latest on possible motive and what the FBI has decided regarding hate crime possibility. And we'll finish up with the Friday Insanity Wrap from my favorite columnist on pjmedia.com, Stephen Green. Has good details. I should say I'm providing good details about Trippin' Joe today and his, or as I referred to him in the thumbnails for today's videos, the Stumblebum in Chief. But let's get right to it. First, our Babylon Bee bookend, and on Friday we only have the one on the left, and it is titled, "What Gender Are You? Take the Quiz." It says, it can be hard to know what gender you are, so many choices, but the Babylon Bee has come up with an easy way to determine which one you are with this handy quiz. Okay, so let's get right into it here. First is, how good are you at parking? Choices are, I can slide Tokyo Drift style right between two parked cars. I sometimes back into a parking space to show off. I can usually get between both white lines, mostly. And finally, I cause millions in damages every time I park. Well, I'm going to go with the third one. That's pretty much where I am, or at least was, since I don't drive anymore. Okay, next up, what's the ideal thermostat setting? 10 degrees Fahrenheit or below, 50 degrees, 75 degrees, or 152 degrees. We'll go with 75 degrees. That is my preferred temperature. Of course, Picasso knows likes it at least 1 or 2 degrees cooler during the winter and warmer in the summer for some reason. Are you good at listening? Yes, I follow instructions incredibly well. And what? I'm going to have to go with what, seeing as how my attention span is absolutely shot, so I'll put that. And which of these movies is your favorite? Die Hard, Mad Max, Fury Road, The Notebook, and finally anything with Jennifer Aniston. Well, of course, it'll have to be Die Hard. And finally, one quick question. What kind of chromosomes do you have? I am XY. And so I will go with that. It may surprise some of you to know. You may not. It may not. And it says, congratulations, you're a man. After taking all your answers into account, we have determined with 99.999% accuracy that you are a man. Congratulations, men are cool. All right. Now we know. Everyone feel free to go to the Babylon Bee's main page and take the quiz on your own. See what gender you are. Okay, the market, my personal conceit. A pretty down day for the Dow. It dropped almost a percentage point, full percentage point, down over $234 per share, closing at just over 32,600 for the day. A big decline from where things were at the end of last week. You remember several times this week the market hit record territory, well over 33,000, and now it has retreated quite well beyond that. The NASDAQ was the only winner today, finishing just over 0.75% up. The S&P 500 was a fractional loss. As you can see, the Dow was pretty shaky all day, a very sharp sell-off at the beginning, a slight rebound, and then, as is usual for the end of the week, a pretty sharp sell-off at the end of the day. But it seems that the big thing regarding the Dow was the Fed's decision to not extend a certain grace regarding capital requirements for banks. It's a little wonky. I won't get into the specifics of it, but the big banks all saw their stocks drag down quite a bit today because of this capital requirement that's basically going to increase over what it is right now. So they're going to have more in assets on hand in order to be determined stable or patent, or however it is the Fed puts it. But that's not the big part of this article. Again, I always recommend never just look at the headlines. Read the whole article, because it's the nuggets at the end that really set things off. So what I have here, this is a quote from, what's his name again? Keith Hembree. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Keith Hembree. He's the CIO for Lineum Capital. And here's his quote regarding the financial markets. The issue is, do we have another fiscal cliff? We'll have a very strong growth this year, but then in 2022, are we going to be even more dependent on stimulus to maintain the strength? Which is an excellent question, because as we know, the restaurant industry in particular has been basically wiped out. A good 30% plus of restaurants in this country no longer exist. And I'm not saying they're closed and are looking to reopen. I mean, they're gone. They have filed for bankruptcy. They have walked away from their property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They are no more. So it takes years for a restaurant to gain profitable status. They hang on by the skin of their teeth for the first 2 or 3 years, usually operating at a loss. And then once they build up a regular clientele, they start to see a return. So it's going to be at least 3 years before we start to see the restaurant industry bounce back into a profitable status. So another quote here. This is by Rafi Boyajian, and he's a senior investment analyst at XM. And he said, although the Fed couldn't have sounded more dovish this week, Powell and his colleagues have inadvertently given the green light for yields, that's talking about bond yields, to continue surging by signaling that they are happy to let inflation overshoot their target as they prioritize growth and employment. Let that sink in. Let inflation overshoot their target. So in other words, the Fed is more than willing to keep pumping money into the economy, which means they are going to keep printing money, raising the debt, possibly exponentially, in order to artificially boost the economy. And we saw how well that worked during the Obama-Biden administration. They pumped almost $1 trillion into the economy at the beginning of the recession, the Great Recession, and we had 8 years of the most sluggish growth in U.S. history. So the Fed is lining itself up to do the exact same thing. Now, I'm not predicting wild inflation or anything like that. We all know that my predictions tend to be very inaccurate, but I just quoted a couple of people who know this stuff and who are pointing towards some possibly worrying signs. So I'm going to leave it at that. Touch briefly on COVID right now. This came up today, and I was really surprised to see it because, as we all know, the current thinking has been for the longest time that the Wuhan virus came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology through some kind of a leak and was possibly ramped up through gain-of-function procedures to make it more virulent, and then it spread across the world, killing millions of people. Well, this article is on sciencemag.org, and it's titled Timing the SARS-CoV-2 Index Case in Hubei Province. It's a real detailed article. I'll just give you some hits from the abstract. Basically, what they're saying is they believe that the SARS-CoV-2 virus actually began outside of Wuhan in a more remote part of Hubei Province and had been percolating for some time. That there had been a zoonotic jump to the human population. They don't say specifically from bats, but we do know that the coronavirus that we're dealing with right now is technically a bat virus that has made a zoonotic jump. So they're saying that this has been percolating, and it took a while for it to get to a point where it could infect more and more people. Initially, it was not spreading very well. It was dying out. And we've discussed several times, viruses like to replicate as much as possible. How something that's merely a fragment of RNA in a protein sheath can think, no one knows, but that's the way they work. And this article by Jonathan Pekar, Michael Warabi, Niema Moshiri, Conrad Scheffler, and Joel O. Wertheim all say that they believe the virus was actually working its way through the population as far back as October of 2019. And it took a few mutations for it to become the current SARS-CoV-2 virus that we're dealing with right now. Again, I'll put the link in the chat. Feel free to look at it at your leisure. It is quite a fascinating piece of work. I certainly am not smart enough to give it credence or non-credence one way or the other, but it is certainly worth a look at. Let me put it into the different chats here. There's YouTube, there's GLive, and there's Trovo. Okay, so we're all in there. And welcome, Wild Saffron, to the Trovo channel. Very nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Okay, continuing on. So the China debacle. That word's getting used a lot with the Biden administration right now, debacle. And for good reason, because everything they have touched has turned to crap ever since January 20th. And it isn't even the first 100 days, folks. The honeymoon was over weeks ago. So now what we have is Secretary of State Blinken and his second in command going to Alaska for our requested meeting. We wanted this meeting. We asked for it between our top diplomats and people from China. And so what does Blinken do? He steps in it. He immediately steps in it, and I'll get into the specifics of that in just a second. Now, originally, both sides were given 2 minutes for an opening statement. So Blinken does his thing, enrages the Chinese, although this could have been something planned in advance, and the Chinese go into a 15-minute harangue on how the U.S. basically has no room to talk, that we are a racist country, that we have a democracy that is completely split in two, and that we are not arguing from a position of strength. And Blinken tries to stand up, but instead uses the phrase secret sauce 3 times, as in, America's democracy and our diversity is our secret sauce. And he also used the phrase America is back at least 2 or 3 times, thereby showing that as far as the 46 asterisk administration is concerned, the Trump administration had zero wins in foreign policy and was in fact just sitting back and only paying attention to America. So nice job, Blinken. You insulted the Chinese and half of America. Well played, well played. So Blinken started off with the Biden administration, quoting him, is committed to a rules-based international order, and then warned that the alternative was, quote, might makes right and winners take all, which he said would make the world a far more violent and unstable place. Now that might makes right and winners take all is a reference to China's current activity, not the U.S.'s. Blinken continued, we'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the U.S., and economic coercion towards our allies. He continued, each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability. That's why they're not merely internal matters and why we feel an obligation to raise these issues here today. Jake Sullivan came out with concerns that China's, quote, military and economic coercion to assaults on basic values, and also said that the U.S. does not seek conflict, but we welcome stiff competition, and we will always stand up for our principles, for our people, and for our friends. So then the Chinese had their turn, and it went something like this. First, the Chinese diplomat Yang, who is the director of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission of the Chinese Communist Party, openly mocked Blinken's comments about rules-based international order. Yang said, what China and the international community follow or uphold is the UN-centered international system and the international order underpinned by international law, not what is advocated by a small number of countries of the so-called rules-based international order. Now, we all know, of course, that China does not abide by international law. If they did, they would not be trying to take over the entire South China Sea and building military bases on what is supposed to be international waters. But far be it from the Chinese to admit to wrongdoing. Instead, they always, as I just said, they argue from a position of power. Even if they may not have as much power as they're pretending to have, they still have quite a bit. Yang continued, openly mocking U.S.-style democracy, saying the Chinese-style democracy had contributed to, quote, peace and development of the world. And he accused the U.S. of, quote, invading, unquote, other nations through use of force and toppling, quote, regimes through various means and massacring people of other countries. Those are all quotes. Yang also said, quoting, many people within the United States actually have little confidence in the democracy of the U.S., and they have various views regarding the government of the U.S. Yang cited the Black Lives Matter movement, saying that there were, quote, many problems within the U.S. regarding human rights. On cyber attacks, quote, let me say that whether it's the ability to launch cyber attacks or the technologies that could be deployed, the U.S. is the champion in this regard. You can't blame this problem on somebody else. And then Yang dropped the hammer on the U.S. in 46 asterisk, saying that it did not, the Biden administration did not, quote, represent international public opinion, close quote, and neither does the Western world. Yang said, quote, so we hope that when talking about universal values or international public opinion on the part of the U.S., we hope the U.S. side will think about whether it feels reassured in saying those things because the U.S. does not represent the world. It only represents the government of the United States. It goes on from there. Blinken tried to stand up for America, but he did a piss poor job of it. He basically just kind of went on and on about various things. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We have reversals. We take steps back. Way to argue from a position of strength, Secretary of State. Here's the secret sauce of America part. Quoting Sullivan. A confident country is able to look hard at its own shortcomings and constantly seek to improve, and that is the secret sauce of America. Again, quoting Sullivan, the other secret sauce of America is that our people are a problem-solving people, and we believe we solve problems best when we work together with allies and partners around the world. And then Sullivan pointed out that, hey, we just landed a rover on Mars, so screw you, China. So Yang comes back. I know I'm putting a lot of detail on this, but this is important. You guys need to stay with me. So Yang fires back, getting even more upset. Quote, well, it was my bad. When I entered this room, I should have reminded the U.S. side of paying attention to its tone in our respective opening remarks, but I didn't. The Chinese side felt compelled to make the speech because of the tone of the U.S. side. Continuing the quote, so let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the U.S. does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength. The U.S. side was not even qualified to say such things even 20 years or 30 years back because this is not the way to deal with the Chinese people. And finishing the article, according to the U.S. government's transcript, Sullivan and Blinken did not respond to the attacks at the end made by China. Okay, so first we'll do some fallout, and then we'll get into a slightly more detailed analysis of how this was a complete lack of intelligence on our part. And I say our colloquially. Certainly I don't back Blinken in any way, shape, or form, and Sullivan is a complete joke, but that's another story. So Richard Grenell, who may or may not be running for governor of California, by the way, he's definitely looking into it. I know Dave Rubin has also considered it, but I'm sure he would step aside for Rick Grenell. I'm sure of it. Anyway, Rick Grenell had a tweet, and I'm surprised his Twitter is still open. And it goes like this. Biden is weak, and many other countries are happy about it, and the woke U.S. media is too partisan to report fairly. And that's responding to a tweet by Ian Miles Chong, which reads, Biden outplayed by Putin, now outplayed by Xi at the Alaska summit. And as you can see, this tweet has gone viral. 1,500 retweets and almost 6,000 likes. So continuing on, Gordon G. Chang to be specific. There's another Gordon Chang on Twitter as well. Different middle initial. But Gordon Chang is basically the preeminent U.S.-China expert. This guy knows his stuff. He's written a number of books on China. All of them have predicted what things that have come true, some more quickly than he had even anticipated. But he is definitely on top of the pulse when it comes to China and the Chinese political system. And quoting his tweet, it's a warning. China's regime sent its emissaries to Alaska for the express purpose of insulting the U.S. Communist China's next move may not be so symbolic. A direct reference to the story we've been talking about, which is a possible invasion of Taiwan by China, a physical invasion. Now, Chang had a follow-up tweet. I'm quoting. China's foreign ministry, reacting to the Alaska meeting, said there was a, quote, strong smell of gunpowder, close quote. That is a direct quote from one of the Chinese representatives. He said that at the meeting there was, quote, a strong smell of gunpowder. So Chang continues, Beijing is whipping up nationalism and preparing the Chinese people for war, creating an exceedingly dangerous situation. And as we've talked about, Chairman Xi is due up for quote-unquote re-election in a couple years. And he's on shaky ground right now. He's got two people in the party who are gunning for his spot. Chinese politics is always a matter of who has the most power behind the scenes and when can they wield it. You are never as strong as you think you are. It's just the nature of any top-down government. And Xi is in very much danger of being submarined. But one of the things that could bail him out would be a successful invasion of Taiwan. They have whipped the Chinese country into a fervor over the fact that Taiwan is threatening to become independent, which means that it would be a direct slap in the face of the Chinese people. Not the Communist Chinese Party, but the Chinese people. So they have whipped the population to a frenzy. The People's Liberation Army, and by extension the People's Liberation Army Navy, that's how it's described, the People's Liberation Army Navy and Air Force, they're primed and ready to go. And China technically has 30% more warships than we do. Many of them are smaller, frigates and landing craft, things like that. But they do outnumber us. The good news is China's military is also very top-down. You do not have the kind of independent decision-making in the Chinese military that we do in the U.S. military. I mean, a corporal in the U.S. military can call in an artillery strike as long as he's got the communications handy. Boom, it's done. Whereas a Chinese soldier would have to get permission, who would have to get permission, who would have to get permission, who would have to get permission. And if it's done wrong, then everybody's fired and probably put in front of a firing squad. So nobody wants to screw up. So nobody takes the initiative. That, again, is the nature of a top-down system. But China has numerical advantages, to be sure. To be sure. And again, they make almost all of our antibiotics out the spigot, and we're screwed. So, of course, there's been some backlash against 46 Asterisk himself over this complete meltdown of diplomatic relations. We've been saying from the word go that China was going to eat Joe's lunch, and it has from the word go. You remember the administration initially backed the findings of an ongoing genocide in Xinjiang province against the Muslim Uyghurs. Over 1 million of them being sterilized, etc., etc., etc. Things I can't say on YouTube beyond that. Probably can't even say that. Who knows? And by the way, I did delete yesterday's stream from YouTube, and I haven't heard from them about anything bad, so hopefully that worked out okay. But China's doing some really, really horrible things to the Uyghur population. Again, things I can't describe on YouTube. So I lost my train of thought. Pardon me. Again, I'm just shaking right now for some reason. But so Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, came out and they said China's committing genocide. Okay, good. Then the new administration comes in, and the State Department initially says we're reviewing the genocide claim, but we're not discounting it. So the word's technically still on the table. And then someone from the State Department testified in front of Congress, and they used genocide, but in the past tense. There has been a genocide. There was a genocide. And so one of the Republican Congress critters on the panel called him out on that and said, you just said was. Don't you mean still or there is? And the State Department guy said, well, that's our finding as it stands. That's where we're at. Wouldn't even commit to saying there's still a genocide going on. And 46 Asterisk has never used the word. Not since I shouldn't say that. Not since the campaign has he used the word. Not once has it come out of his lips since he took office and started ruining the country with executive orders and executive actions. So what I have here is a pretty good detailing of how Blinken screwed things up. But before that, I want to quote a tweet from former Secretary, if you will, Mike Pompeo, and it reads, "Strength deters bad guys, weakness begets war." Okay, now, here is an excellent breakdown of this. This is from the Center for Security Policy President Fred Fleitz. He's former NSC Chief of Staff, CIA analyst, and House Intel Committee staff member. And Fleets basically says that Blinken and Sullivan and whomever gave them their marching orders absolutely set this thing up for complete disaster. Let me read this to you. Quoting, "Let's think about the incredible incompetence by the Biden admin which led to that train wreck of a press conference that Secretary Blinken and Jake Sullivan held with their Chinese counterparts in Alaska yesterday. Blinken thought it was a good idea to open their meeting by slamming China before the press, probably thinking this would help counter Republican criticism Biden is weak on China. Of course, the U.S. needs to raise the issues Blinken mentioned, but raising them at a joint press conference insulted the Chinese and caused them to lose face." Let me let that sink in for a second. Lose face. If there is one thing in the Asian culture that you do not screw with, is someone's reputation. They will fight you to the death over their reputation. That's one of the ways the Chinese social credit system works so well, because they diminish your ability to function in society. I'd like to welcome Far Dog Joker to the YouTube chat. He says, "China is building man-made islands that they are stocking with anti-aircraft batteries and surface-to-air missiles near Taiwan, and are going to start taking complete control of the shipping lanes very soon." I agree completely. That's something we've been talking about quite a bit. So very well put, Fair Dog Joker. Very well put. Continuing on with the... but anyway, losing face, as I was saying. You can't diminish someone, say from China or Japan or Korea, whatever, in front of other people without expecting huge backlash. And that's exactly what Blinken and Sullivan did. They attacked the Chinese in an open press conference with cameras running and microphones on, and the Chinese had no choice but to absolutely attack back and attack with everything they had. Okay, continuing the comments from Fleets. Biden foolishly did not anticipate that the Chinese officials would retaliate in their remarks responding to him. This gave the Chinese officials a rare opportunity to dress down the Secretary of State before the press. Blinken was visibly unnerved by the Chinese response. Blinken's response was defensive and incoherent. He also repeated Biden's silly "America is back" theme. Most disturbing, despite Blinken and Sullivan's criticism of China, there was not one word on Beijing's criminal negligence that allowed the coronavirus to become a dangerous pandemic, or any criticism of China for its continuing refusal to fully cooperate with international investigations of the origins of the virus, including inspections of the Wuhan biolabs. And finally, Fleet says, "This press event in Alaska was a debacle that will build a perception that the U.S. is returning to Jimmy Carter-like incompetence in foreign policy. America's enemies are watching and planning how to cash in." Now, my favorite tweet from all of this is by Amber Athey, or Athey. I can never remember how to pronounce her name. I've seen her on a number of news shows. She's very smart, very astute political commentator, and she's quoting a tweet from Secretary Blinken from not too long ago when he was in Korea. And he has a picture of himself eating a Korean dish called sundubu jigae, however that's pronounced. Looks good. It looks good. It's an interesting type of soup. But Amber quotes that tweet, and she puts on top of it, "How did China's boot taste, you absolute muppet?" So there's that. Now, of course, this isn't the only foreign affairs mess that 46 Asterisk has put us in. You'll know that on Tuesday night, during a quote-unquote town hall with Georgie Stephanopoulos, the former political hack from the Clinton campaign, whose job was literally to suppress quote-unquote bimbo eruptions. That was Hillary's term. It was Stephanopoulos' job to step on any reports coming out of the press regarding these different allegations of sexual assault by then Governor Clinton on various staffers and people in Arkansas. The names are everywhere. We all know their names, although right now my memory won't allow me to bring up even one of them. I apologize. I'm sure you all can name several in the chat. But, and hey, LB, nice to see you. But, it's just Biden called Putin a killer. Not directly. Georgie asked Biden, is Putin a killer? And Biden says yes. Yes. Okay, so pretty emphatic on that. So Putin responded by saying it takes one to know one. Although I believe the proper translation of the Russian children phrase is, whoever says it, is it? To which Picasso Knows replied, when I told her that, is that their version of whoever smelt it, dealt it? I can't go any further than that. But Putin responded then by saying that he wished Biden good health and that he was not being ironic. And then he challenged 46 Asterisk to a live debate. So it could be over video conference, just him and Joe, and it had to be live, no tape delay, no editing, just the two of them, mano a mano. Remember, by the way, that's not mano y mano, it's mano a mano. Mano y mano means hand and hand. Mano a mano means hand to hand. Some people get that wrong. There's your Spanish lesson for today. So Putin just goes right after Joe, basically saying, "Hey, you've got all this time to call me a killer. Well, let's see what else you got, bud." And Biden's team didn't say anything for quite a while, a couple days. They just sat back, hoping it would blow over. Well, it didn't. It didn't. You'll remember that Biden and the Democrats in general made all these huge claims that Trump wasn't doing anything against Russia after supposedly Russia had told the Taliban they would pay bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads in Afghanistan. Now, we know for a fact that the Iranians did that and did pay some money out. But there was never anything beyond one intel slip. And by that I mean slip of paper about this supposed Russian bounty. There was never any confirmation of it. There was never even a second source backing it up. But the Democrats ran with it during the campaign over and over again. Trump's soft on Russia. Trump won't hold Russia accountable for something that the administration later proved was not a real threat. So now Putin challenges Joe to I shouldn't say face-to-face, but a head-on battle. And Putin wins. Putin wins. I'd like to quote Fair Dog Joker in the YouTube chat again. China has the world's largest and with the most advanced technology in the world. The U.S. is still developing hypersonic missiles, but the Chinese have them in service already. I did not know they already had hypersonic missiles. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. So, what was the Biden team response finally about this whole thing? They say Biden's quite busy, and so he doesn't have time to do it. White House Press Secretary Jen... Oh, by the way, this is an article from the New York Post by Mark Moore from yesterday afternoon. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki quickly rebuffed the invitation and the tiff over the killer comments, saying Putin and Biden have, quote, different perspectives on their respective countries, close quote. Different perspectives. So calling someone a killer is a perspective now. It's not a moral judgment. It's a perspective. This is just as bad as when Biden said that China has to be given a little bit of leeway. I'm paraphrasing, but still, China has to be given a little bit of leeway because basically genocide in their culture, in their society, is a different, quote, cultural norm than ours. And he literally used that phrase, cultural norm. And so now, calling someone a killer is a matter of perspective. Psaki continued, we are confident that we can continue to look for ways when there's a mutual interest, mutual national interest, but the president is not going to hold back clearly when he has concerns, whether it is with words or actions. But this is my favorite part. Psaki said that Biden and Putin talked in January, quote, even as there are more world leaders that he has not engaged with. I thought we were told that Biden had talked to all of our allies, excluding Saudi Arabia, of course. and took him forever to talk to Israel. So once again, mixed messages from the White House team as to who exactly is talking to whom. And for some reason, Harris met with the Irish Prime Minister the other day. Why number 2 in the White House is meeting with another head of state, I should say a head of state. That's the third one at least where Harris has taken the lead in international discussions. France, Canada, and now Ireland. What the hell is going on here? I'd like to welcome Michael Scriven to the YouTube chat. Oh, yeah. Cold day. Sorry to hear that, sir. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's not nice here either. The wind's been blowing for days. Sucks. All right, continuing on. So I have a tweet from Kevin Sorbo. Hercules, for those of you who may not have been alive in the 90s. Great show. A lot of fun. Put Kevin Sorbo on the map. He has since made a name for himself in the cottage industry of Christian movies, some of which are fairly good. To be honest, most Christian movies are pretty heavy-handed on, you've got a person who is going the wrong way in life. They're more concerned about this or that than God. And then there is a tragedy in their life, and they find God, and then they turn everything around. And in the end, everyone's holding hands, singing Kumbaya. And, of course, that's not how life works for the most part. But Kevin's been in a couple good ones. And he was canceled by Facebook not too long ago. They just, boom, pulled his account. Gone. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers gone. And Kevin Sorbo is very popular on the Comic-Con market. He goes to all of the Comic-Cons and does very well, signing autographs for a few bucks, taking pet selfies, things like that. And he loves his fans. Because he knows he'd be nowhere without them. And he just got treated like trash by Facebook. But he still has a Twitter account. So I have a tweet here from Kevin. Hope he doesn't mind I call him Kevin. And it's a picture of a Chevron gas station in what looks to be Los Angeles. I say that because there's a street sign in front of the bus that's there on the left-hand side of the screen that gives directions for South Alameda Street. And of course, Alameda is a busy thoroughfare in LA. But the big thing here is the prices on the gas station sign. As you can see, in case you have a decent resolution on your monitor, regular gasoline, and I'm going to be rounding up, is $5.56 a gallon. Let me say that again, $5.56 a gallon for regular. Mid-grade is $5.66, and premium, or supreme as they call it in California, is $5.76. And the most insane part of this is diesel is $5.86. Diesel is actually 10 cents higher per gallon in California than supreme or premium fuel. Now, some of you may know diesel is not as refined as gasoline. Therefore, it is less expensive to make. There are no reasons for diesel to be as high as gasoline in general, much less higher than premium, high-octane gasoline. That is California dissuading, by any means possible, people driving diesel cars or diesel trucks. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Okay, continuing on. Getting into Congress. Got a couple stories here, and then we're going to be breaking for the after show. We're going to be ending a little early on YouTube today. I have a lot of stuff that I couldn't compile justifiably for the YouTube show. And again, since they've demonetized us, I really have to watch my stuff, or they may pull this channel altogether. So 2 stories here, both about Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Remember, she was newly elected from Georgia, and she has been under fire because of past tweets when she was a member of the Q Club, and also had some pretty weird thoughts about Jewish space lasers causing the California wildfires a few years ago. Taylor Greene has since denounced all of that. She said she was caught up in a bad crowd and it allowed herself to get pulled into some conspiracy stuff. But she finally found her way out of it, and she has disavowed all of that. And again, as someone who believes in the Judeo-Christian tradition, I am all about forgiveness. She has said she made a mistake. She does not believe any of that anymore, and I am right there with her. God bless you. But the Democrats aren't so quick to forgive, of course, because they are the party of tolerance. They are the party of inclusion. And they are the party of, if we don't like you, we will ruin you. See how that all fits together? It's just a perfect little bundle. Inclusion, acceptance, and we'll ruin you if you don't agree with us 100%. And if you don't believe me, look at just what happened to the newly minted editor at Teen Vogue, a magazine that has become a complete Marxist rag. And if I believed in censorship, which I don't, but if I did believe in censorship, Teen Vogue would be one of the first ones on the list, because it is indoctrinating young children into Marxist ideology and pansexualism and all kinds of other really crazy stuff. Some of it really sick. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Teen Vogue because a niece of mine, she was actually featured in a Teen Vogue article a long time ago. Her room was so well designed. She has a real flair for art. So does her mom. My sister, the popcorn shop entrepreneur. But my niece had a beautifully appointed room, really, really cool, really dazzly, but not kitschy. And word got out, and Teen Vogue came over and did a complete photo shoot of her in the room, and had a big article on her, and her clothes and all that. Now that's all out the window with Teen Vogue. Now it's all about, how to yell at your parents for being Republicans. But anyway, the newly minted editor of Teen Vogue, someone dredged up some tweets of hers from 10 years ago when she was a freshman in college, where she made a couple swipes at some Asian teaching assistants, and I believe also an Asian class member. And they were racial attacks, although not egregious. But she was singling them out for their race. And she has since apologized. She says, I'm not like that anymore. Well, it doesn't count. The left wants her head, and they got it. She has been fired from Teen Vogue. She's without a job. I don't know how she's ever going to find work now. Her name is completely trashed. It's going to have to be some conservative publication that would be interested in picking up someone. And she is obviously far left field to have gotten a job at Teen Vogue. So I don't know where she's going to land. I hope she lands somewhere and successfully. She deserves that. She did not deserve what happened to her. But that is the left eating its own, as we have predicted time and time again, and have been proven right time and time again. When they don't have anyone else to go after, they go after themselves. Like we've said so many times, just because you are nice to the alligator doesn't mean he'll eat you last. And that's what the left is doing to itself. But they're not just satisfied with ruining the life of a Teen Vogue editor and costing the magazine $1 million+ ad campaign from Ultra Beauty products. They're also trying to kill the career of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Again, for past comments she has disavowed. For some reason, the Democrats decided it was completely within their rights to strip Taylor Greene of all of her committee assignments. So she has no voice in any legislation coming through, although the Democrats don't listen to Republicans right now anyway, even though they have the smallest majority in the House basically ever. They do not have a majority in the Senate. They only have a tie-breaking vote if Harris steps into the chair and slams the gavel down and gives them 51 votes over Republicans' 50. So the Democrats can't afford to lose one senator on any bill that can go through with just a majority vote, which would mean any budget bill that could go through reconciliation. And they're going to try to do that with the infrastructure bill. They're talking about it already. They're also talking about ruining the filibuster. So we'll see where that goes. Although Kristen Sinema is still being pretty adamant that she's not going to vote for that. Yeah, well, Uncle Bobbity referencing the Atlanta shooting. We'll get to that in the next block. I'm getting there. I didn't want to do it in the YouTube block just in case because of certain restrictions they may or not have. But I'll get into that. Thank you for bringing it up. But so Representative Jimmy Gomez, California Democrat, is going to introduce a resolution today. It has 72 Democrat co-sponsors. And that is a resolution to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene from Congress. Just boom. Her voters don't mean anything. Screw Georgia. Screw democracy in action. We're going to boot her out because we don't like her. Now, I thought that the Democrats were all about counting every vote and letting elections stand. That trying to overturn an election was basically treason. I believe that word was used a lot last year and early this year. That if you wanted to overturn an election, you were committing treason. So how is having a, I would say, legitimate difference of opinion on the outcome of a certain election, I can't go any further than that. How is that different than stripping a duly elected congressperson from their office for things they did when they weren't in office? If that were the case, if the Democrats were going to hold themselves to their own standards, then Eric Swalwell would no longer be in Congress. Neither would Dianne Feinstein. Both of them had Chinese spies close to them. With Swalwell, perhaps intimately close, if you get my drift. Yet Swalwell is still on the Intelligence Committee, the most really important and far-reaching committee in the House. And Feinstein had a Chinese spy for a driver for 10 plus years. But they've been allowed to stay. But Marjorie Taylor Greene said some things that are pretty outside the realm of normalcy years ago. And now they're just going to say, you screw you. You don't belong in Congress because we don't like you. I tire of pointing out the hypocrisy of the Democrats. I grow weary from it. It makes me tired, honestly, physically tired to have to keep saying it, but it's true. And we can't let up. We cannot allow this to become the norm. I highly recommend, I was on the phone with Senator Ron Johnson's office today, but I finally had to hang up because the show was starting. I was waiting on hold. I'll explain why in a second. But call your congressperson and tell them to support Marjorie Taylor Greene. Because you'll remember, a number of Republicans also voted to strip her of her committee assignments. Totally stabbing her in the back. Didn't make Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, look good at all. Didn't look like he could control his caucus worth a damn when that happened. So you need to back up your Congress critter and get them to support MTG as much as possible. Now, Greene isn't just getting it from Congress. Twitter is going after her. Earlier, Twitter had locked, it looks like I'm going to get out on time after all. Earlier, Twitter had locked Greene out of her account. They've since said that it was a mistake, an error in the algorithm, and that they've restored it. Once again, for the 1000th time, how many liberals have been locked out of their accounts mistakenly? How many? Can't count too many of them, can you? But it happens to conservatives all the time. Now, that is her official account as a U.S. representative. She has been blocked from her personal Twitter account for quite some time. So there's that. So she has no means of defending herself, basically. And she's adrift in a sea of quote-unquote Republicans, at least 10 of whom voted to strip her of her committee assignments along with a pack of rabid Democrats. Okay, so we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. Thanks for being here. We will be switching over to the Trovo and DLive channels. Let me put the screen up, the split screen. There you go. The addresses are trovo.live/AHNC_hat. Remember, do not type in www. That doesn't work. Just type it in as I described it. It's on the screen. And or dlive.tv/AHNC. That'll get you there. And you'll see the rest of the show. Remember, we'll be ending the show with Stephen Green's daily column, Insanity Rap. We'll be doing today's column, plus a reference to something from yesterday. And we're going to continue on. So goodbye, YouTube. Goodbye, Michael Scriven. Goodbye, Fair Dog Joker. Thank you both for being here. And we will see you all soon. Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern, as a matter of fact. Wait a minute. Let me check something real quickly. I have a doctor's appointment next week, but I can't remember if it's Monday or Tuesday. Let me look real quickly. I don't want to give you guys false... Well, I shouldn't say false hope. I may or may not be hoping that there's a show. But it is, in fact, Monday. I will be downtown Chicago Monday, so there will be no show until next Tuesday, which is the 23rd. Glad I looked. So, I'll YouTube. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.